Okay, just as I was starting today, this story was in the news. Skripal attack. Russia faces US sanctions over Novichok use. And this is the, oh dear, boringly, tediously predictable story that the United States is imposing fresh sanctions on Russia, which Russia describes as draconian, because they have determined, the US, that Russia used a nerve agent against a former Russian double agent living in the UK, Sergei Skripal. And also, of course, his daughter is said to have been attacked as well by Russia. Now, the evidence that they put forward is non existent. And what the UK have done now is point the finger at some Russians who are now in Russia. And of course, this is a real get out clause because they know that Russia won't extradite the people they are targeting and thus will never appear in court to be tried and the evidence put forward. And so now we have this whole nonsense with the United States imposing more sanctions on Russia. And what it is from a wider picture point of view is confirmation that Trump doesn't run the White House and the Trump administration. Well, none of them do. But this is obvious because it's clear. I said this in the last book. It's clear that Trump, left to his own devices, would probably get on with Russia. I mean, you know, I think he, for all his faults, and they are legion, he doesn't see the point of all this antagonism with Russia. But every time he's tried to get rapport, of course, the deep state, as it's now called, the permanent government, not least the media owned by the permanent government, has gone hysterically crazy. And of course, people like around him, like John Bolton, his national security advisor, and all these other people that connect into the neocons that have been behind all these wars, conflicts, death and destruction in the Middle East, they go into response mode to stop any rapport with Russia because they don't want it. They want conflict with Russia. And another thing that's, a clear strategy that you see again and again, it's being used not just with Russia, it's being used massively and obviously with Iran, is you keep applying sanctions to a target country. And the more you do that, the more the economy of that country starts to struggle. And what you're doing is trying to make the government unpopular with the people. I mean, if the people would just open their eyes to actually what's going on, they would say, hold on, yes, we're being manipulated here. We're being manipulated to attack the government because economically things are not very good. And they're not very good overwhelmingly because of all these sanctions that the West has been applying on us. So we can see we're being manipulated. But of course, at the same time that the United States and Britain and Europe in general goes on about Russian meddling in elections, the United States is openly supporting and encouraging, funding and arming, in truth, dissident and opposition groups in Iran. And so, as with the Arab Spring, what you do is you create basically a proxy army of people who appear to be anti-government protesters, and you start demonstrating. Of course, the media pick it up and give you loads of global publicity, and then others who are not part of it. They're just members of the public that would simply don't like the government. This is what happened in Egypt and these other countries in the Middle East. They then start joining the protests, which have been stimulated by Western-backed and trained and funded agents provocateurs. And suddenly this bring down the government movement starts to motor and flow, and more publicity, and then more Western pressure, and all the raft of things that they do, and the target government comes down, and the target regime comes down, and that would have happened in Syria, but for the intervention of Russia, of course. And of course, when you look at this Arab Spring, which was supposed to be the emancipation of the Arab world from those portrayed as its tyrants, they have not been replaced by anyone better. When you look at the tyrant as he was portrayed, Gaddafi in Libya, yeah, I'm sure he was, but Libya was also the highest per capita income country in Africa. Now it's a basket case, and just in the midst of, in effect, gang warfare, tribal warfare. And the West have just left them to get on with it, because what they wanted was Gaddafi gone. They got that. Now, okay, you get on with it now. And of course, the people fighting, and the people that removed Gaddafi on the ground anyway. He was removed from the sky, really, by NATO. They're just too stupid and too full of their own agendas to see what a massive manipulation that they've been subjected to, which has turned their country into an extraordinary mess. You look at Egypt. Egypt's run by a military junta. Then this was supposed to replace the tyrant of before. I'm not saying there weren't tyrants. I'm saying what's happened as a result of this Arab Spring. Nothing. Why? Because it wasn't meant to. It was just a way of targeting leaders in the Middle East, that the West, and particularly America and the neoconservative US liberal Israel alliance wanted removed. And I say liberal in the sense of how people are perceived to be liberal when they're not, so-called progressives. We've seen this situation now where the so-called liberal left, and it is so-called, most of it now, I'll call it the progressive left, actually the regressive left, but anyway, which once was in the streets marching and protesting against these overseas wars. Now they just either support them or just don't really respond, and so it's becoming basically the norm. that these countries are targeted in many and various ways by the US administration of whatever apparent, supposed political background, Democrat or Republican. And so what we're seeing now is a repeat of that, of course, in Iran, where they are applying the sanctions to cripple the economy, while at the same time they are behind these dissident groups and opposition groups who are building up or trying to build up opposition in Iran to bring down the regime that the West wants to bring down. And sure, they would like regime change in Russia as well. But the strength that Putin has in terms of his stranglehold on that country, if you like, and public support, it would seem, it's going to be very difficult. But the sanctions go on being applied, and again, for no reason justified by evidence, because they don't need evidence anymore. They just do what they like, say, this is why we're doing it. Evidence for that? This is why we're doing it. Okay, we don't give you evidence. It's that kind of world now. So I'm not surprised at all to see the Russia situation continuing, because no matter what Trump may think, it doesn't matter, because he's just a frontman. And because he's a bombastic, narcissistic frontman, gives the impression that he's in charge. He ain't.